Henry Ford famously said, "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Now, that statement happened decades ago, but it's more potent and clear today than it even was back then. The way our current monetary systems are designed are so convoluted, so complicated, and so marred in mystery and arcane language that the majority of the people have no idea how these systems are being used to exploit people on the planet. I know a lot of what we're talking about in Seeds is complex, and it needs to be in order to be a robust alternative to these current systems. But I assure you, even though it is complex, it's orders of magnitude less complicated and less convoluted than what we currently have. What I want to do right now is shed some light on some of the more complicated terms that we've been using throughout Seeds. The first one is blockchain. I know this term scares a lot of people, and the videos out there talking about blockchain are way too technical and they get bogged down into the details that don't actually matter. So let me just give a really high-level overview of what blockchain is and why it matters. So to put it very simply, blockchain is simply a vehicle for trust. So putting it in the context of money, money is simply a medium for trust and exchange. So bringing it back, our original economies were gift economies where we trusted each other. We had this intense web of trust and networks where we loved and knew each other, and we trusted that if we gave value to someone, they would give value back, or it would circle around. It's the same way our tribes and families operate. And this is how humans operated for a really long time. But it wasn't until agriculture and the advent of cities and civilization that our tribes started getting so large and our communities so large that we didn't actually trust each other anymore. And this is where new tools needed to come into play that helped facilitate this trust. And this is where money, came onto the scene and started to get the most prominence. So money became useful because you didn't have to trust in the relationship anymore. What you did was you trusted in the weight and the scarcity of that metal that you are being given. So gold is a good example. You could weigh it, you can know how much it weighed, you can know that there's a finite amount of gold, you can know that this would likely be accepted by someone else. So you could trust all those factors, and this is something you would take as a medium of exchange. Okay, and then gold started being manipulated and changed by the empires. But what they did is they stamped their face on it. So now it was no longer trusting in the weight and the purity of that gold or that metal. Now you're trusting on the face and the stamp that was on that token. So now your trust shifted from the metal to the empire. And that's kind of where we're at today with our money. Our money systems are backed by the nation states that support them. So you no longer trust in them. They're not backed by gold. They're not backed by any other tangible asset. What they're backed by is the nation state's promise that they're going to be worth something. But as of late, and what we've seen historically, that promise is it's not one that we necessarily should trust anymore. And this is why blockchain is so paradigm changing and so revolutionary, because before we needed these intermediaries to facilitate trust exchange, but this blockchain, it's called trustless because you actually don't need to trust in anyone anymore. And what that means is that you can actually go and see for yourself how it's working. So the blockchain is simply just a ledger that anyone can go and look up and say, okay, this is what the ledger says. This is what it says it's going to do. And now I know. So I don't have to trust that there's only 1 million tokens in circulation. I can go and see for myself, okay, there's only 1 million. Someone makes a payment. I don't have to trust that they did that. I can go and see for myself that it happened. So this works for money, this works for voting, this works for everything. Any type of thing that you used to have to trust that it would get done, now you can see for yourself that it either is done or it is going to be done. And this is what smart contracts are. Smart contracts are something you can go and see for yourself how that contract operates, and then you know that if A happens, B is going to take place because that's what the contract says, and it's immutable and it's there. So that's where we can, replace escrow, replace insurance, and replace all these things that used to require someone in the middle making sure people said they were going to do. We could replace it with a contract that automates that. and that both parties can go and look at it and say, okay, yes, it says it's going to do that. I can trust that that's going to happen. So ultimately, at the end of the day, blockchain is a form of trustlessness, and it facilitates trust in communities at scale. I do want to bring it back to the gold concept, though, because I want to hark on this. It was so insane what we were doing with gold. I mean, you got to think about it. We were tearing up our earth, panning our rivers, taking gold out of every aspect that we can get it in, melting it down into its purest form. And in a lot of cases, digging a hole again, building a vault, putting some guards in front of it, and sticking that gold right back into the ground. And we were doing this whole complicated, convoluted process just so we can trust each other. And that's what's interesting about the arguments today about going back to the gold standard or going back to gold because we could trust it. We can go forward into a new system that doesn't require we tear up and destroy our earth in order to trust each other and have facilitations of mediums of exchange. We don't need those tools anymore. We have much more, powerful and potent and sustainable tools to be able to do that. And that's what the blockchain is. So just like you don't necessarily need to know how the internet works in order to engage with it, just like you likely don't know how the current monetary system works, but you still use dollars, you don't necessarily need to know how the blockchain works or how blocks are created or how it's minted or any of that process. What you do need to know is how to engage with it, how to go verify the truth, how to go look up, answers on the ledger and see for yourself that things are happening. That's what's the most important part to understand. So we're going to do some videos on that to teach people how to actually engage with these tools so that they can be trustless, so you can go see the truth for yourself. And the last piece I want to touch on that Seeds is doing that a lot of other blockchain projects haven't touched on is the ability to govern and change the blockchain as well. So in Bitcoin, it's very difficult to evolve and change it. For some, that actually adds a greater element of trust because it's always going to be the same way forever. That's an interesting concept, but in our ever-changing and evolutionary world and our needs are constantly changing, we actually need something that can evolve and adapt as our needs are evolving and adapting. So that's why we built in this idea of decentralized governance. So now not only can you trust that the protocols are going to do what they say they're going to do, now you can trust that if they're broken or if they don't do what they say they're going to do, there's a governance process in place that allows us to evolve it, to fix it, to change it, and to keep this process evolving and better meeting our needs in a trustless, decentralized fashion. So that's why this is a paradigm shift. It's using tools that have never before been possible to do something that has never before been possible. And that's at scale, collaborate and govern in a trustless way to build a different financial and governance system. So blockchain is what is at the foundation of this, and it allows us to be able to do this at scale. So that's my introduction on blockchain and trustlessness.